right, so once again, a very, very warm welcome and thank you so much for joining us, leaders. Uh, we are talking a lot about the big picture. We started the day by discussing, how sure are we where we are when it comes to the future. I think most of us said that the future is already here, and most of us also agree that, we are very close to what the future could look like. So, the first question, and I'd like all my panelists to answer this for me, would be the world of work we all know is getting back to normal in many ways, but needless to say, the whole pandemic was an eye opener. And those learnings are still worth keeping. So, what are your primary takeaways from the crisis? And Pei, I would like to go ahead with you first.
Thanks, Yasmin. Great question there. And I think like the pandemic, one of the big changes all of us saw coming in was the rise of remote work and the rise of flexibility. So, pre-pandemic, less than 1% of jobs were promoted as being able to be done remotely. And then right now, what we see is like there's a much larger number of jobs that are able to be done remotely. From LinkedIn's data, we see between 10 to 20% of jobs posted now offer remote options. And we also see that these jobs get a lot more attention and a lot more interest compared to the jobs that don't. And I think that's one of the changes that's here. And I think it's new but it's definitely here to stay. And it's also great because having these flexible remote options helps to enable different segments of the workforce, such as women, to be able to contribute and to be able to participate more actively.
I absolutely agree with you. I think this flexibility is something that has become the biggest demand from the workforce in the past 2 years, I must say. With the great resignation coming in, I think one of the biggest causes that made it happen was flexibility. And as you said, it gives you a larger talent pool. Flexibility gives you more people, it gives you better talent. So why not? So that's a great takeaway. What about you, Catherine? What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Yasmin, for having me here, and good afternoon to everyone. We have the after lunch slot, so hard work trying to keep everyone awake. Um, where do I begin? There were so many lessons that we learned, right? A few things. Number one, key thing that I learned is human beings are highly, highly adaptable, right? Under COVID, everybody started to live differently, date differently, fall in love differently, work differently, got married differently. So human beings are highly adaptable. Human beings are also tribal animals, which means to say prolonged social isolation is extremely unhealthy, right? So, what that means for an organization is as we really try to figure out what is the best way to work, flexible work, hybrid work, 100% from home, half and half, whatever it is, I believe one of the key learnings is because human beings are tribal animals, we want social interaction, we want to feel a sense of affiliation. So every organization must find a way to still ensure face to face, person to person interaction, right? How that looks like, synchronously, asynchronously, we don't know, but I think it's extremely important. Second key learning on the point of talent is the talent marketplace has no time zone and is boundaryless, right? The implication for us in organizations and in HR is I I have far from cracked the code, okay? But what it simply means is today, work that 3 years ago we thought could be done or must be done on site now can be done far away. You might never meet that person. So, what does that mean for us in our talent marketplace? What that does that mean for us as an organization in terms of the distribution of our workforce? A lot to think about. And at this point, I have a lot more questions that I have an answer, right? But the opportunity is tremendous. The third key learning is total well being is more important than ever. And the pandemic really accentuated that and brought that front and center. So we might get a chance to speak a bit more about it later, but this concept of mental wellness and total well being cannot be that of a program or an initiative anymore. It has to be part of our future leadership playbook. And all of us here have an opportunity to write that playbook. So, all right.
Such great points, Catherine. Thank you so much. I so agree with you. The whole fact about human beings are adaptable. I think the past 2 years was the biggest test of how do we handle a crisis, and we showed by adapting, by changing the way we live, by changing the way we work overnight. I think that's a beautiful point. And as you said, flexibility, yes, very very important. Talent, borderless, again, very very important. And the third one, which is I think the most critical part that came out, was about well-being, and yes, mental well-being being at the top of that because of what the world was going through. Great, great, great learnings. Pasate, over to you. What do you think have been some of the greatest learnings?
Yeah. After considering there are some concern in internal organization, I will try to figuring how the business trend on the future, because this may change all the process in managing people. Likewise, the business trend now is starting from computing, AI, machine learning, maybe crypto, metaverse, or even disruption itself. But today, as a HR, we have to manage the disruption. It's no longer our company is being disrupted. Agree or not, it's already coming. And based on this, actually, our internal organization must be changed. If you see, based on McKinsey report, towards 2025, there are at least 10 skill required, which is totally different with the skill that we have learned past 30 years ago, like us both. We are both is veteran, actually. Yeah. So
Same time zone.
things like design thinking skills, analytical ideas, technology, platform, and everything. Seeing this, we recommend to adapt ourselves. Maybe we can close our book, because in the future is uncertainty, like we said before. The uncertainty may not seeing the past experience to predict in the future. But today we have to manage the data itself to managing people. After that, we analyze to be able going to not just only predict, but also prescriptive. In the future, we have to go to the cognitive era, which is that's Japanese saying industrial 5.0. My country is still industrial 3.5, not really 4.0. It's quite far away. Yeah, that's my comments. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing, Park Satya. I totally agree with you. Yes, as you said, some countries are far behind, but some are already there. The future is going to be uncertain, but how we prepare for it and how do we take forward these learnings is going to be very, very important and critical for organizations if they want to stay ahead of the curve or even stay relevant for the future. That ways, because a lot has changed. We will what happened 2 years ago when might not remain relevant anymore. The skills that you spoke about, whatever we knew of, some of them have already become redundant. So it's about preparing for the next, right? Very very rightly put. Moving on to you, I'll come to you, Catherine, again with my question now. Future proofing organization is one of your many KRAs, one that most organizations are focusing on. What were the major challenges you faced as a leader, and how did you overcome them? And if you could share some best practices for our audience here, that'll be really nice.
Not so sure about best practices. Future proofing is a very, very big word, right? But to your question, in terms of challenges, um, I think our key challenge remains in two big areas. Skill sets is one, and Park spoke about that, right? And I think the next question is on skills and training, so I'm not going to touch on that. Leadership, ways of working, and how do we help employees thrive? Not just engage, but thrive, right? We can have all the right skills, but if leadership is not on point and employees are not thriving, then the great resignation will continue, right? So I think the pandemic really pushed us to move not just a lot faster in our digital transformation, but to really pivot in terms of leadership, right? Many of our leaders today are still super comfortable with command and control and long cycles of analysis, long cycles of problem solving. That has to be thrown out of the window. So, out with leading with authority, in with leading with empathy, and in with rapid cycles of experimentation, rapid cycles of user testing, rapid cycles of iteration, right? Park spoke about design thinking. That's exactly what it is. Agile ways of working. And the implication for us in HR is the entire HR scaffold has to shift. The way we design an organization, the way we do performance management, the way we do rewards, it has to shift dramatically in order to embrace how fast the world is moving, the velocity with which change is moving. So that's one. Big challenges. I'm much better at calling out the challenges than giving you a solution, okay? But I also learn that the question is more important than the answer, because when we are down the path of the right question, there is a much higher chance of finding the right answer, right? The second challenge is truly the Great Resignation showed us what does it mean to help an organization thrive? What does that mean? Right? And I want to say that every day we are in this challenge of what do we do? Do we pay people more? Do we give them more benefits? Do we allow them to work from home 100% of the time so it's flexible? Do we have a sexy purpose statement? Because that seems to be what Gen Y or Gen Z and Gen A, maybe after Z is A, it's looking for. But really, I believe it boils down to two things. A, meaningful work. Work that our colleagues resonate with, work that makes them feel like they really make a difference, work that helps them grow, work that lights them up like a Christmas tree, right? Number one. Number two, back to the basic of the employee and manager relationship that is deeply rooted in care, psychological safety, and trust, right? So two biggest challenge outside of skill sets, right, and a world that is unpredictable is really still leadership, ways of working, and how do we help our employees thrive.
That's so beautifully put, Catherine. Any other panelists would like to add on to that before I move on to my next question? And what Catherine shared was, I think, it summarized it really well. Any thoughts on that?
Maybe best practices from both of you that I can
Yeah,
steal.
maybe we can hear some examples on that, because I really wanted to again touch upon the whole back to office dilemma also here. So maybe we could hear and then
Yeah, I mean, I think unlike my esteemed panelists here and many of you in this room, I'm not a HR expert. I'm not a CHRO, but what I see is like what we see from the data in terms of the future of work, in terms of the trends that we see. So, absolutely on point with Catherine. One of the things we see is how skills are changing very rapidly. So we've done some analysis on this. We've seen that even for the same job, the skills that are needed to do that job have changed on average about 25% over the past 5 years. And from a trend perspective, we believe it's going to change by about 40% by 2025. So what that really means is that, upskilling and reskilling is so very critical, because the skills that you need to do the exact same job is changing so quickly. So even if you plan, or even if employers plan to keep their employees in the same job, you can't just stay there and stagnate, because your job is changing on you, even if you don't change your job. I think that's one of the key things that we see, right? And on top of that, I think L&D, learning and development, now becomes a key component of a business priority. It's not just a good to have anymore. It's something that's critical, both for the business, and it's also something that employees want. So, in that sense, it's a win-win situation. And it really helps when you are able to not just put employees through a training process, but also to connect to them with what this training and what these new skills mean in terms of more job opportunities, whether it's, an expanded job scope, or whether it's internal mobility into different roles. And that just really helps to enhance the relationship that we've got going between the employer and the employee, and it helps to build a lot more trust in them.
Great points again, Paying. Thank you so much. I think, Catherine, you very rightly pointed out that it's time. I think one big lesson we got to know from 2020 onwards was leading with authority does not work anymore. It's all about leading with empathy and how ways of working are changing and how do we support them? How do we make it work for people and help them thrive? Very, very important point again. And as Paying also added to it, skilling is one of the major challenges that uh, I think world over organizations are facing. And how do you upskill your employees? How do you make them future ready, relevant? How do you ensure that the skills that they have today can be enhanced for a better business, going forward also? Because business and learning, as that we've been hearing this today a lot, are now aligned. The business agenda and the learning agenda of an organization are very, very aligned. So thanks for sharing that. Pak Satya, any thoughts on that, on some challenges that you could tell us about, and any thoughts on how you've been dealing with those?
Yeah. My opinion is quite similar. What I want to share actually is how employee feel after, during pandemic, maybe 2.5 years stay at home, but now government already open, then all is want to go out. So the matters, yes, wellness and the character of empathy and caring is must there because we want to accompany our employee to be more productive, right? So yeah, basically, it's our guy is have a lucky day because of that our productivity is increased. That they work until 11 p.m. Anyway, it's so crazy with the maybe three cell phone zoom together. I don't know which one we can focus, but that's mean not industry can do that. It's depending our infrastructure. So, for example, in my corporation, we developed before pandemics in 2015. We mitigate using RBA robotics until to 2019. We start to use, and pandemic actually give us opportunity to test our engine. And of course, the culture and leadership must be there because we used to be facing meeting with one on one, but of course on the field side like sales and because we have a energy business on the side still they work like it is, right? So that's mean we develop three character. Maybe you also can develop your character based on your nature of the business and the culture. So we have first is a winning spirit. So everybody must become a winner. Whatever you can do your job in your home and become a winner as a spirit. The second thing is resiliences. Means that you never give up. You have a bounce back, right? And then the third one is not rocket science. That one is rigorous, tactical. When you board, then you close your phone because it's already 11:30 p.m., right? So the rigorous also means that we are so tactical without sacrificing the quality. We can jump from step 1 to step 10. So these three main characters we developed starting in 2015, and we found the new coming up, either millennial or baby boomer still. Because I asked the baby boomer guys, actually they also don't want to go to the office every day anyway. Thank you.
Go to office. I want to ask one question. How is it with you? How are you dealing with the whole back to office dilemma? Catherine, is your organization, how are you looking at it? Because there's a lot of difference that we've been seeing in how leaders are looking at it. Some want it to happen, some are considering a hybrid mode. So what are your thoughts on that?
As an organization, we have come out very clearly to say that flexible work arrangement, hybrid work arrangement is here to stay. At this point, we have a 3 and 2 arrangement. 3 days in the office, 2 days you work from home, and you get to pick and choose what are those days. And you have to ensure that that's in sync with your team members, right? Just so you don't compromise the productivity of each other. We have yet to fully figure out what is the most productive way to do this. That's the honest truth, right? We have two key principles. productivity and flexibility. And we're trying to find that sweet spot. Haven't found it yet. We're trying to experiment. So we thought maybe every Tuesday, everybody comes in. Then we will have all the face to face meetings. Then we'll realize we'll probably never leave the office because we'll be meeting round the clock, right? So we really haven't figured it out and would love to learn from any of you or my fellow panelists here if you have found a better way to do that. But I would say employees are highly appreciative of the flexibility. So they appreciate that. Some, of course, ask to stay home more. And we also try to be more principle based versus rule based, right? If you have a family member who is ill, or in Singapore, if a child is going through PSLE, God forbid, right? And you need to be home to look after the family member or help your kid through an exam, then of course we'll exercise more flexibility, right? So we're still trying to find that sweet spot, but essentially we embrace a new way of hybrid working. Yeah.
And that is here to stay. I think that is going to be the way forward because flexibility, as we all said, it is the key differentiating factor for why employees are choosing an employer over the other today. So yes, that's going to be a fact. So
Not
thank
to mention, we are telco technology company. So shame on us if we can't figure out remote working, right?
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. Any other thoughts on that? On back to office?
Yeah, I think I agree completely with Catherine. You know, the two pillars that you talked about, productivity and also flexibility. And I think one more that I kind of want to layer on top of that is equity or equality.
Lovely.
Because what happens like when you have some people on flexible, some people fully in the office, very visible, very physical there, and then some people who are kind of in hybrid, and some people who are not even in the same country and never get to see their managers. So, when you think about all of this, I think my sense of this is that one of the challenges that's going to come about is how do you treat all these different ways of working, treat the people who are working in all these different ways equally. How do you assess performance? How do you assess promotion criteria? And how do you address some of these like subconscious biases that, I will admit I have some of that too, where if you see someone physically in the office doing work, it just tends to be much more, or you just tend to remember that a lot more than someone who's off at home, maybe working till 11, but you don't see it. So as a leader, I think one of the things that's really important is thinking about how to address these kind of equity issues. And this is especially so because we know from our data that women are much more likely to embrace remote work. They're much more likely to want these kind of flexibilities. So if you put them together, what that then means is that if there's an unequal treatment and women are more likely to be on the remote work schemes, then you now have an unequal treatment of certain segments like women.
That's a great point. I think what you added to productivity, flexibility, and equity. Now, how do you make it equal? How do you make it equitable, in fact, for your workforce when they choose not to work from office and work from home? How do you still make it, inclusive for everyone? Very important. Thank you so much for sharing that. Moving on to my next question, and I'll come to you, Pei, again first. A lot will now depend on how the employees are being provided with learning and upskilling. As we said, it's one of the biggest challenges companies are facing now. And now it's said that it's not just the L&D leaders' responsibility, it's also the CHRO, the CEO who's responsible for the learning organization. So how do you plan to change the learning landscape? Can you tell us a little bit about that from your experience from LinkedIn?
Yeah, so for me, when I think of the learning landscape, I think about all the new ways in which people can learn now. And then, it's again, it's not just sitting in a classroom with a lecturer there droning on for 2 hours and then taking an exam, which we all hate. It's about bite-sized pieces of knowledge. It's about on the go courses. It's about agile learning, learning what you need, when you need it, and in just the right amount. So I'll speak a bit more about LinkedIn Learning just because I'm more familiar with that. But I think everyone in this room also knows there are many different platforms and many different learning platforms out there. So on LinkedIn Learning's site, where there's I think over 17,000 different types of courses that can be done across a whole range of different topics, and the content itself is pretty bite-sized. It's on the go. It's accessible through mobile. And I think those are the things that people look for these days. Convenient, on the go, easy learning when they need it.
As learning is being more democratized, learning is becoming more self-driven. I think it's all about the pull that you can create and give them that kind of content and that kind of flexibility to learn wherever they want from, whatever they want at whatever time they want to do it. So that's a great point, Paying. Any thoughts on that, Pak Satyo?
Yeah. So I will bring some text from Zig Ziglar. The only thing worse than training employee and losing them is to not train them and keep them. It's very worse, right?
Very great thought.
And then you don't build a business, but you build a people. That's why continuing to develop people is quite challenging today. If you see the mission is already changed with the unpredictable and the business still going, some business going to a technology platform and everything, then modifying, like I can learn anywhere, anytime, then come to the technology as enabler. So my point is, like other industry, when the growing is very fast, and then we have to create another, say like 300 CXO. How come it's happened? Because the talent is scarcity anyway. The talent with the technology mindset is quite scarcity. So that's why to create that must be like, I will call it like a ecosystem, the learning ecosystem. So it consists of using all the data that we have before in the manual training plan and everything there. And then curation is there, and using AI and machine learning become doing curation for us to be able to grab another different job. That's been the concept. Everybody have to be Superman, can do anything. For example, like I'm a legal, for example, I have to learn tech. And then people from finance, I have to learn technology as well. So it's like broaden our domain and become, we can do anything. As I said, like a super job. It's good for us because in the future, the typewriter job will be dismissed in the world. I think about 10,000 job will be dismissed. Then we have to equip our employee with a ecosystem platform, which is consists of learning itself, and then I will call it like collaborative learning ecosystem with a mentoring, all right? And then inside of that, yes, agreed, there are 1,000 global top university inside the platform itself, because we want to create our employee become super job. They want to learn to Cornell, Harvard, MIT, whatever you want. With the inclusive principle, means that company must invest is so much actually to be able to create another super job. And then not just only like that, the platform itself also divining with a, I will call it like assignment monitoring, because the engine is there. They will help HR to monitoring each of the progress of the materials. Today is so many platform help us. We don't tailoring by ourselves because it's a journey. It's get too long to mitigate or to make it happen, right? So yeah, that's a part of our job, to be able to grab the future trend, future business in our companies. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. It's now time. Before I move on to the audience for their questions, I have one final question for all of the three panelists here. So I'll come to you, Catherine, first again. One piece of advice from you to CHROs who are preparing for this changed world of work.
Maybe less of an advice, but more, I would like to give a big shout out to all CHROs here and across the globe and all HR teams. You have all done a fabulous job navigating COVID in the last 2 years.
Yes.
I don't have to say much about how challenging it was and how much we've had to dig deep to really navigate this along with the organization and give so much of ourselves, our care, our love to the people around us, right? To pull it through. So well done. And along with that, I just want to really, really encourage all my HR friends and non HR friends as well to take time and make your well being a priority. The thing about us in HR is we look after everyone, right? We think about the learning and the development of the whole entire organization. We often put ourselves last and we put our teams last. It's time we flip that and really make well being a key priority for yourself and for your team. It's super important so that we can really go for the long haul,
Lovely.
right?
Thank you.
So that's my shout out. And the second thing, I know we're running out of time, is it's more an appeal. I appeal to us not to cave to the temptation of speed every day. Hire faster, digitalize faster, train faster, produce great leaders faster, right? I appeal to us. Speed is, of course, important, but it's important that we don't let that become the only criteria and cave to that. It's very tempting, right? Why do I say that? Because our job is to really build resilient organizations for the future, which means we need to focus on inclusiveness. We need to focus on deep psychological safety in an organization. We need to make well-being a priority, and we need to write the new leadership playbook that is different from what we grew up with years ago. All right.
Beautiful thought. Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine. Pak Satyo, now what about you? What advice would you give?
Yeah, all is cover. It's already cover. But maybe I will give a bit clue to us. We must learn until end of our life. That's the slogan, right? But it is come true. Like me, myself, yeah, I give examples because our group is around 250 companies. Then I'm responsible to create another super job. So even I'm already veteran, but I push myself to learn. My background actually is legal and social science, but now I'm going to technology. So I study in some university in Cambridge, Harvard, and I'm study from the scratch, from the zero, like a binary and everything, computer science 5.0, and learn about Python. So at the end of the day, my employee, my staff look at me, hey, how come you are veteran still learning, yeah, outside of your domain. Yeah, that's I propose to all of us.
Lovely.
Keep learning because that one is a mandate and also provoking our employee to become super job.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other thing is facing in the future. It's totally different games. I think that's all from me. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Great thoughts again. Thank you, Ping. And coming to you now.
So I think like great roundups from everyone else on the panel. To me, I think like the biggest learning or the biggest observation I've had through all of this with COVID and everything is, how difficult it must be to be a HR leader during these times, and and also like how important it is to, like Catherine says, not just rush and like try to do everything faster, but also to think very carefully about the equity aspects of stuff. So, for example, when we think about women representation in the workforce and how COVID affected them, whenever there's a crisis, we always see that underrepresented segments get hit a lot worse, and we saw that with COVID. And on top of that, we also see things like leadership gaps, gender leadership gaps, and all of these accumulate over time. All of this accumulate to create inequalities across the workforce. And if we don't take active steps to try and balance the scales, then we are eventually going to move towards a much more inequitable world, a world that's very difficult for a lot of people. And I think, like, to me, that's the biggest learning that I had.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Any questions at all do we have from one? Okay, I can see a hand there.
Yes, hello, Anthony Hayward from Hard Skills. I have a question for Catherine. The telecom sector in Singapore is very competitive, as she will know, and is made up now of a mix of incumbents and startups, some of whom have scaled very fast. And I wondered if she thinks through to the market share, let's say in 3 years, what behavioral traits will the winning companies in that market be most exhibiting?
I shall attempt. I shall attempt. I'll share with you what keeps us awake, right, in the senior leadership team and discussions that we have across with the board members. The winning traits: A, deep curiosity, and the curiosity has to reside with what is most important for the customer, right? The curiosity has to be focused outward. Number one. Number two, really shifting away from just a traditional telco play to a much broader technology play. Very important. So for us in the organization, we have a few culture markers. One of them is customer at the heart, right? That is that deep curiosity and commitment to really up our game all the time for the customer, for the consumers, and for our enterprise customer. Really becoming very nimble and very agile as a technology company, as you would see in the offerings that StarHub has. Today, if all of you are football fan, you know that we are bringing soccer to all of you in a very affordable price. But we are also bringing to you gaming. We are also bringing to you a couple of other things that I cannot talk about yet, but security, right? And other services that really wraps around your household and your lifestyle. And always an attitude of the challenger and super humble. You know, that's one thing that we talk about internally, which is what is the relevance of benchmark? When you benchmark, and if you're the first, what happens? Do you stop? You don't, right? Because you have to keep going. So perhaps less of a holistic answer, but more really sharing about the things that we think about a whole lot, in the organization that impacts our behaviors,
All right, thank you. I think that was all the time we had for this session. So I want to thank our panelists, Catherine, Pei and Pak Satyo, for joining us. Indeed, the future of work, the bigger picture, it is that the future of work has already arrived. And it is about how, as leaders, we look at creating a workplace which helps our employees thrive by giving them the flexibility, by taking care of them, by enabling them, empowering them with the right skills, the right knowledge, and whatever that is needed to help them bring their whole selves to work, give them meaningful work, purposeful work, take care of them. I think that's going to be very important. Build those kind of leaders that inculcate that culture. Also create a learning culture in the organization. These are going to be very important going forward, not just today, but for the long term also. So on that note, thank you once again for helping us crystal gaze into the future and giving us the bigger picture. So thank you once again. Let's have a huge round of applause for our panelists, everyone.